I'm Dr. Tracy Stecker, and welcome to the Choosing Help podcast. Choosing Help presents conversations about courage, connection, and the transformative power of asking for support. Through candid discussions, expert insights, and real-world stories, this podcast breaks down stigma and opens doors to understanding. Join our community committed to compassion and courage. Because when we choose help, we choose life. I'm Dr. Tracy Stecker, and today I have with me Dr. Troy Rohn. Dr. Rohn is a professor at Boise State University and the co-founder and director of preclinical studies at Cognogenics. Did I say that right?
You did,
Cognogenics.
yeah. It's kind of a tongue twister.
Yeah, yeah, I had to separate that out. He's an expert on neurobiology and mental health, and the author of a new book called Brain Medicine. And that's what we're going to talk about today. In his book, he really discusses the neurobiology of anxiety and a potential new treatment for anxiety. And so, welcome to this podcast today. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here, Tracy. Thank you for the invitation to speak about obviously a very important topic that,
Very important topic.
that
Yeah,
affects a lot of people.
absolutely. And anxiety disorders are on the rise right now.
Yeah, they've actually quadrupled since COVID.
Yeah,
So that just gives you an idea.
which is understandable. Well, your book, I did
Absolutely.
read your book. It was amazing.
Thank
One of the
you.
things that I loved about it was how clean, clear, straightforward it was. It talks about anxiety. If you want to know about anxiety, anxiety treatments, um, neurobiology of anxiety, and then potential new strategies to treat anxiety. This is the
Mhm.
book for you. I highly recommend you buying the book, Brain Medicine. One of the first questions I wanted to ask you, because many of us, well, probably all of us know what it feels like to be anxious. We all know
Yeah,
that feeling of nervousness and anxiety. We all have
yeah.
had that experience once or twice or a million times. So most people know what it feels like, but probably not many of us truly understand what's happening inside of our bodies. Could
Yeah.
you walk us through what the actual biology is? What's happening inside that's causing that anxiety?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because, a lot of people kind of think about anxiety that it's kind of like has to do with emotions, but anxiety, the feelings that we feel about anxiety are actually generated by our brain. And
Hmm.
it's actually an adaptive response. It's a base out of fear,
Hmm.
so anxiety is supposed to be something a good that can help somebody escape a dangerous situation.
Yeah.
And the problem though is, so the analogy I like to use is that, think of anxiety as kind of being a smoke detector. It's kind of alerting us to a potentially dangerous situation. But where anxiety can become detrimental to like mental health is, if it's persistent and chronic and begins to disrupt daily life. And
Hmm.
and that's kind of like if the idea here is if the smoke alarm keeps blaring in your ear, even though the
Yeah.
fire is gone.
Right.
Okay. Um,
Right.
and so these circuits in the brain are there fundamentally for a reason, but the basic idea is that these feelings are based out of things that are happening at the molecular level, right?
Okay.
They're happening at the cellular level. They're being influenced by neurotransmitters, by our genes, and by circuits in our brain that basically give us that feeling of anxiety, which again is
Yeah.
a fear-based circuit. Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of where when I've thought about how to treat anxiety, many of the therapies we use today really treat the symptoms, but what we really need to do is start like treating the underlying circuitry, right?
Right.
And really get to the root of what is causing anxiety in the brain.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, where medicine is going in general, but particularly for things like anxiety is trying to develop better medications that actually target the underlying biological process that causes anxiety and not just treat the symptoms of anxiety.
I think that's a really good point because people who don't have chronic anxiety might think it's just their thoughts. They're thinking these thoughts, which is causing them to feel anxious. And if they could just turn off those thoughts, then they won't feel anxious anymore. And you're saying it's on the I'm not going to be able to say that molecular level.
No.
It is more the body is wired to feel that way. The cells are doing what cells would normally do in order for that person to stay safe and alive. But there's a short circuit happening.
Yes.
Something has interfered to modify that process biologically, and it's not
Yeah.
the person's thought.
Yeah, so one of the things that people that study anxiety and neuroscientists is that these anxiety circuits basically are overactive in the brain.
Uh-huh.
And so the whole idea about trying to introduce new therapies is targeting the not just the pathways but the actual the receptors that are producing this overactivation.
Okay.
And I think that again, this is once we realize that this is a brain disorder, right?
Hmm.
It's like you say, it's not because people are being emotional or they're
Hmm.
thinking too much. Once we say, hey, this really is a brain disorder,
Hmm.
then that kind of opens up our minds to new ways of treating potentially anxiety.
Yeah. And the chemicals that are activated with anxiety, do you want to talk about those at all?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, their neurotransmitters are kind of the chemicals that our neurons, which our brain cells use to communicate with each other. But serotonin is kind of the one that everyone kind of locks into for good reason
Hmm.
because it's really important for mood. It's really
Hmm.
kind of a modulator, and serotonin, kind of does its work by binding to what we call specific receptors.
Okay.
And the so it's kind of like serotonin is kind of knocking on the door, and then these receptors are going to go answer the door and stimulate some downstream events that are going to cause the neuron to do something, and that's going to lead to some kind of behavioral change.
Okay.
And so the kind of the traditional medicines that have been used for anxiety are still used are the SSRIs.
Hmm.
And so what these drugs do is they basically boost serotonin throughout the
Okay.
brain.
Hmm.
And the problem with that, I mean, they are effective and they do work, and they are the best approach today based on the guidelines because the older way that we treated anxiety was through benzodiazepines like
Uh-huh.
Valium and Xanax. But the problem with those is that they are addictive,
Right.
and they create a whole host of problems, and they have lots of really powerful side effects.
Right.
So it's not the long-term management is usually through an SSRI.
Uh-huh.
Um, the issue with boosting serotonin throughout the brain is that you actually have um, 15 different serotonin receptors, and they're not all like doing the same thing.
Hmm.
And so, the approach really is to be able to hone in on that one receptor that is linked to anxiety and depression. And by the way, schizophrenia. And that's the receptor that I'm very interested in. It's called the serotonin 5-HT2A receptor.
Hmm.
And so um, that that receptor is the one we think is linked to these pathways that give rise to anxiety. Um, and the other problem with SSRIs is that they tend to not work very fast.
Hmm.
Um, they can take anywhere from 3 to 10 weeks to actually have their benefits. And
Yeah.
they're very challenging for someone like me, where I have a type of anxiety disorder that just comes on suddenly. And
Okay.
the SSRIs really don't do much in that situation.
Right.
Um, and so, they're really, frankly, they're kind of outdated medications that have been around for decades, and so that's kind of why I together with some of my other colleagues helped co-found this company. Was that we really wanted to try to treat anxiety in a new and different way.
Yeah. And maybe target the correct receptors. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
So while we're talking about treatments for anxiety, there are a variety of treatments. In your book, Brain Medicine talks about each of those, really. You do a good job
Hmm.
explaining them and the pros and cons of many of them.
Yeah.
If somebody's listening, um, and have not had treatment for anxiety, where would you tell them to start? What kind of treatments would you recommend?
Yeah. So first of all, let me just say it's really important to have a holistic approach. It's
Hmm.
not just medication.
Hmm.
One of the things that works really well for anxiety disorders is cognitive behavioral therapy, which I'm sure you're very well aware of. Um,
It's my
and
personal favorite.
it's very, it's important that that we always try to include some professional counseling to kind of get to the root of the problem of why people are feeling anxious, but also give them the tools to
Hmm.
be able to handle a situation when they're when they're feeling anxiety come on. So,
Yeah.
for example, one of the things that I do that I've been taught through my cognitive therapy is, visualization techniques. So, my anxiety is that I don't like being around like groups of other people, like crowds, really like get my anxiety going.
Hmm.
And the worst thing for me to do, like for example, is like to go to a concert.
Okay.
um, and so what I try to do is visualize that process before I go, like
Hmm.
how am I going to get to the concert? Who am I going with? Where are we going to sit?
Hmm.
Those things that most people don't even think twice about
Yeah.
because they don't get that anxious feeling. They're all excited and looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Those things can disrupt my enjoyment of the
Mm.
concert. But when I visualize that process, it really helps me kind of prepare for the situation so that once I'm actually doing at the concert, I'm actually, it's actually supposed to be what it is, which is fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there are the medications, like I said, the most common medications now are the SSRIs like Lexapro and Zoloft, and Paxil. Um, and I think that almost all individuals that have some kind of anxiety disorder or, OCD,
Hmm.
are going to be prescribed an SSRI.
Hmm.
And then there aren't a lot of options available for if you have sudden anxiety, so
Yeah.
that's the problem again, like one of the medications that doctors will prescribe is a drug that's basically an antihistamine, and it just makes you tired,
Yeah.
and and they're not going to prescribe you things like Valium anymore, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so those really are the gold standard. They really work well, but
Hmm.
again, the risk of addiction is too high, and
Right.
and so um I would say a holistic approach.
Hmm.
First, getting on an SSRI, getting some kind of therapy
Hmm.
is usually kind of the standard, go
Yeah.
first initial steps for treatment.
Yeah, and I think too, just listening to you talk, I think it's important to understand for somebody who's listening who has anxiety, who hasn't had treatment and might feel overwhelmed by this whole entire conversation, that there are options. That's good news. There are options. And more are being developed. More better are being developed. So
Yeah.
that's also the good news. We do
Yeah.
understand much about the neurobiology of anxiety, what's going on. The other thing that I
Well,
think is
thank
really
you.
important to understand is that you're not failing. You're not failing your brain and body because you're anxious. This is a brain disease. This is something that's happening on I'm going to say it again. I'm going to stumble over it, molecular level.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not your fault. But
Yeah.
there are, while you wait for these new therapeutics to be developed, there are things you can learn to do. You can learn your triggers. Hopefully, you can learn most of your triggers. Sometimes they do happen out of the blue. Um, when you are triggered and are having that anxiety, you can learn ways to calm your body and your mind down. You can learn how to separate yourself from a situation, even if it's just inside your own head, until you physiologically feel yourself coming to a more calm space. You can feel prepared. You can have a preparation plan for when those overwhelming feelings happen. And I think the other thing, you didn't say it, but I'm gonna say it for you. As somebody
Please.
with anxiety, you've dedicated your life to treating anxiety, and obviously have been super successful. So even though there are significant disruptions to life,
Hmm.
it's you can still have a very functional, fulfilling, promising, and maybe even groundbreaking career.
Absolutely. I mean, it's it can work both ways because the anxiety is kind of can be a driver,
Yeah.
right? It can kind of like just keep you on edge. But on the other hand, when it begins, for me, it really began to disrupt kind of my professional and personal relationships, and
Hmm.
that's when I really said, okay, I need to really like get some help,
Yeah.
and get some treatments.
You didn't mention one of your treatments, even though he's sitting right there.
Yeah, Bailey.
Geez,
So
sorry.
yeah, no, that's fine. And I talk about Bailey in the book because, service dogs or support dogs, the literature is very clear that
Hmm.
these can reduce our anxiety,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And, I'm currently teaching right now at UC Berkeley, and I bring Bailey everywhere, and so I can see her reducing anxiety in my students. Like they,
Hmm.
it's almost like they immediately reduce that overstimulation of those pathways,
Yeah.
and like they're for people that have PTSD,
Hmm.
that that's really they really do work. And of course, they're great friends and companions, and yeah, I strongly recommend them.
Yeah, I'm going to even expand on that. Service animals are amazing. Having a service dog, a therapy dog, my son has diabetes, and that's also one of the options for him. He struggles with low blood sugar sometimes, and so a dog can help alert and be his sidekick and help alert us. He doesn't have one yet, but it is an option. These service dogs are amazing. But I was even thinking just any of the arts, music can help anxiety,
Yeah,
being in
yeah.
nature. I live on the ocean, water. You also are in, if you're in UC Berkeley, you're near
Hmm.
ocean. Water is
Yeah,
very soothing. Gardening, there's all sorts of activities, arts,
yeah,
crafts, animals, nature, all of it. I think we didn't talk about those as formal treatments because they're not
yeah.
formal treatments. Well, the service dog is, but they're very, very therapeutic for managing anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. And one theory is that we're the brain activity, like we think that the serotonin 2A receptor is excitatory.
Hmm.
And if it's overamped, it's going to, lead to this anxiety. And one of the things that meditation does is we know that things like meditation can put
Hmm.
you into what are called theta waves. And what
Hmm.
theta waves are, it's a level of brain activity where things kind of slow down a little bit. And we know that in that stage of when you are in the theta stage, that you're going to have improved clarity. Your mind is going to be clearer. You're going to have reduced anxiety. And, talk about when, at some point, I hope we get a question about my book, because uh, we've demonstrated that if you turn down this receptor, not
Hmm.
only does it reduce anxiety in our animal models that we've looked at, but it improves their memory greatly. And
Wow.
so, that was kind of a surprise. We didn't expect that robust improvement in memory, but it does make sense
Yeah.
based on this idea that this receptor is just overstimulated.
Well, let's talk about your book. Let's talk about your potential. Well,
Yeah.
you've studied it in animal studies. Your next step is human studies. What is the gene therapy treatment that you're currently developing and testing?
Yeah. So let me just say a little bit, just to kind of about the book, because the book is really, I think, unique because it's kind of a combination of the science part
Hmm.
of gene therapy, which I really wanted to try to demystify, because, I remember the first time we gave a pitch to raise capital for our company, and we were pitching in front of these what are called angel investors. And,
Hmm.
there was two other groups. There was our group. There was one group that was trying to pitch a phone app, and another group that was trying to pitch some kind of toilet bowl applicator.
Oh,
And then here we are trying to pitch something with gene therapy, and needless to say, it went straight over their head. Uh,
yeah,
and but I understand it is very complicated. It's very hard, and so one of the reasons why I wrote the book is I wanted to be able to people to understand this new tool that I think is going to change medicine.
yeah.
And the other main reason was my own personal journey with anxiety. And
Hmm.
so every chapter I kind of start off with something about myself and my anxiety. And so it's really kind of a combination of, I felt like the timing was right, basically, for me to talk about my personal story, because it's not
Hmm.
easy. And
Hmm.
then also, talk about this new science. And
Hmm.
so the science basically of gene therapy is the main advantage of using gene therapy is that you can really be precise, right? So it allows you to target um, the molecules way upstream of the actual receptor protein,
Hmm.
and to basically turn down the volume of that using genetic approaches.
Hmm.
And so you're not just boosting serotonin everywhere. You are
Right.
selectively targeting a single gene, a single receptor, and that mitigates side effects, right?
Hmm.
You get much more a better precision. And of course, the other advantage is that depending on the type of gene therapy, you may only have to if it's a CRISPR based therapy, you only need to do it once. It's a single one treatment, and you're basically hopefully cured, right?
Right.
And so they're it's an exciting area. It's an area in biotechnology that's just exploding, and
Hmm.
so I spend a lot of time trying to for people to understand, what is gene therapy and how are we using it to treat something like anxiety by targeting this, not the protein, but the gene.
So it's one of the things that you said is it's not just targeting all the serotonin receptors in the brain, which not all of them are related to anxiety. It's targeting the specific one, which
Yeah.
is important because you don't want to mess with all of that. You want to mess with the one that matters in terms
Right.
of the problem at hand, so to speak. But it is almost like a procedure, like a surgical procedure, in that
Yeah.
it's potentially be a one and done. Something's gone, something either genetically was wired in to be that way for that
Yeah.
individual, or something got
Well,
tripped.
let me give you one example. Just this summer,
Hmm.
the FDA approved a brand new gene therapy for children that are born deaf. And
Hmm.
these children are deaf because they're missing a gene. They're missing a gene so genes are kind of the blueprint, the template to build proteins, and it's proteins that basically are the workers in all of our cells, and they're the ones that determine behavior basically together
Okay.
with the environment. But basically what this therapy does is it gives them back that missing gene, and now they can hear again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the power and the technology that we're talking about. And
Hmm.
the potential is just, it's not just for neuroscience, but this is also like for cancer. It's for any kind of life-threatening disease, you name it, because basically it's just finding out what gene and
Hmm.
protein you want to change, and voila, you have the
Changing
tools
it.
to do it.
And we know which protein and gene to target with anxiety.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of data to support that it's this 5-HT2A receptor that's linked to anxiety, it's linked to depression, it's linked to schizophrenia. Again,
Hmm.
when we talk about serotonin, it's just a really important modulator of those types of behaviors. Mood and thought, are really, it's not the only one, right? So norepinephrine also, we know, is important for mood, but it is a major player, especially for anxiety.
Okay. And then in the book, you talk a little bit about potential interventions. So you talk a little bit about the blood-brain barrier. And so
Yeah.
it's not surgical. How do you change the blueprint? You talk a little bit about that. I thought maybe it'd be
Yeah.
worth you.
I think it's,
Explaining.
it's a one thing that's really challenging about treating a brain disorder is you have what's called a blood-brain barrier. And the blood-brain barrier is just like it sounds, is that things have a very challenging time getting into the brain
Hmm.
because the brain has to be kept kind of pristine and protected. But it can be extremely hard to get in these types of large molecules across the blood-brain barrier. So, one of the other kind of novel things that we're doing in our company is we're using intranasal delivery.
Hmm.
So, most people don't want to get a needle stuck into their brain
Hmm.
to get this material in there. But what we found, in fact, we just completed a really important study in monkeys where we show that when we deliver this cargo to monkeys through intranasal, it gets into their brain. And we have some data already that it basically is chilling them out. It's making them
Okay.
less anxious.
Okay.
So we're really excited.
Hmm.
Um, that's hot off the press, by the way. And so
You heard it here first.
yeah, seriously. Um, so we really believe that this approach is viable,
Hmm.
and but it's really important not to hype, right? To
Hmm.
hype something, we're hopeful, but
Hmm.
that hope is based in science. So we're driven by the science. Hype is not driven by science.
Hmm.
And so I think that the in the end, we need to make sure that it works, it's safe, and it's effective before we actually try it in humans. And so that's all part of what is called preclinical testing. That's a huge part of drug development.
All right, so where you're at right now, you already understand the biology, the biological processes that are happening on a molecular level. Ooh, I said it good that time.
Yeah, you did.
You've done some actual clinical studies on mice, on monkeys, and the
Yep.
next step is FDA approval for a human trial. Is that correct?
That would be basically, we probably still need to do a little bit more on the safety side
Okay.
in potentially primates. But yeah, so we're getting closer. I mean, I
Okay.
hate to make predictions, but I feel like we're getting closer and closer to being able to actually test this in humans.
And so, in terms of some of the safety issues that you're seeing so far,
Yeah.
what are you seeing? What's happening?
we're not really seeing any strong side effects, but you know, there are some really important ethical issues that you have to think about when you're talking about this type of therapy. First of all, gene therapy is really expensive for the most part. If you look at there is one available gene therapy for sickle cell anemia now, and it's a cure. It's a CRISPR-based approach, but it's over $2 million for that treatment. And
Wow.
so this kind of leads to the issue, of accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to have access to these medications, and how can we make sure that people have access? I think
Mm-hmm.
another important kind of ethical issue is, we've showed these effects in terms of improved memory and decreased anxiety in
Mm-hmm.
healthy mice.
Right.
So this gets into the area of like human enhancement,
Right.
is that ethical, and should we be doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, and so again, I think that there are really there are thoughtful issues that we have to consider when we're using this type of technology in putting our best foot forward to make sure that it's ethical, safe, and that it actually works.
Yeah.
So, there's a reason why it's a slow process. It takes on average 12 to 15 years to bring a drug to market, and over $2 billion. So it's a very costly and time-consuming process.
And the process is to change the actual blueprint in the brain, the DNA. That's what it would be done. That's what you're attempting to do.
That would be one approach. The other approach, as I talk about my book, is to go one. So the DNA is kind of the CEO, and it
Mm-hmm.
stays in the nucleus. It's passed on. It's the blueprint, but it dispatches its instructions
Mm-hmm.
to make a protein in the form of RNA,
Mm-hmm.
which is another type of nucleic acid. And RNA is kind of like Snapchat. Like it goes out, it says make this protein, then it gets broken down.
Uh-huh.
And so, we are a lot of companies are working on what we call RNA interference or RNA gene therapy, because
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of less risky, right? You're not like changing the DNA,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's another approach. So it's one level down. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a cure because you haven't fixed the gene, right? Or
Right.
you haven't tinkered with the actual DNA. So
Right.
you theoretically would have to keep treating with this RNA therapy. But
Mm-hmm.
certainly the FDA is in a little bit better. They're a little bit more comfortable with RNA, what we call RNA interference, than they are with like CRISPR-based technologies that actually change the DNA.
Yeah. I think this was such an interesting conversation because you're describing anxiety, what it's like to live with anxiety, what kind of treatments are available now, and which ones work more or less, what they are, pros and cons, and then the next steps where we're at on
Yeah.
a biological level where we could go next. We're not
Yeah.
there, but we're on our way to be
Yeah,
there.
it's really kind of a message of, hope. Like,
Yeah.
A, you're not alone, and
Hmm.
B, you have a brain disorder
Hmm.
that we is happening. There are reasons why you feel the way you do. And
Yeah.
C, we are on our way to potentially better treatments.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. And it's also not your fault. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
with anxiety feel like they're doing something to cause it, or maybe other people are telling them, buck up or just don't think that way. And it really, that's really not fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a key point, and one of the reasons why, I have the great opportunity to teach these younger generations, the Gen Zs, and they're much more open with mental health than
Hmm.
our generation, which
Hmm.
it was often considered a weakness, right?
Right. Yeah.
They have no problem talking about mental health, and I think that's a real asset because, that with communication comes understanding, with understanding comes knowledge, and with knowledge comes the power to change.
Yeah.
And so I think that, we can learn a lot from, these millennials. We give them a bad time, but in that respect, they really have an advantage over us.
I agree. I agree. I'm counting on these millennials, this
Me
Gen
too.
Z. Any last thoughts before we close?
Um, no, I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, on this important topic. I think as someone that suffers from anxiety, um, one of my goals is to show people, like you said, that even people like me suffer, and I need help, and
Mhm.
their help is out there,
Mhm.
and you know I think that trying to just be positive about who you are and why you're thinking this way
Yeah,
is an important first step. So
absolutely.
thanks for the opportunity. I think it was a good discussion, and again, a lot of this is really broken down in the book. So if you're interested in if you want to learn more about your own brain health and
Mhm.
really kind of get to the science, then I think it's a good book for you.
And you do an amazing job of making it understandable, something that is complicated.
Thank you.
You do a very good job of making it
Thank you.
clean, clear,
Appreciate that.
straightforward. So, if you want to learn more about this, please pick up the book, Brain Medicine. If you are struggling with mental health or substance use issues and you want to learn more about our resources, you can also come to our website, choosinghelp.com. But thank you. I'm going to close there. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Tracy.